In the simplest terms, a signal is a message broadcasted by an object in Godot. It's the way of the object to say, hey, this happened. Now, in more technical terms, when looking at the documentation, we realize a signal is a built-in type representing a signal of an object, so a message that can be broadcasted, and any object or any node that inherits from an object will be able to use signals. What's useful about this is that you can choose which objects listen to what signals and what they do with that information. Some will listen for a specific signal and then be able to do something else with that information, and others simply don't care about that signal. So before we talk about how to use signals, let's first talk about where to find them in the editor. When you click on a node, here on the scene side, on the right-hand side under the node tab, you'll be able to see under signals all the signals that specific node has. Something also important to note is that when an object inherits from another, it also inherits all other signals. So if you look at the node signals here, if I click on button and scroll all the way down, under node, I'll be able to see that it also has these signals because it inherits from that node object. So there are two ways to start using signals in Godot. The first one is through the editor. So let's go to our script. We have our button node selected, and on the right-hand side, let's double-click on the signal we want to connect to. You can also hover over these signals to view a description. So pressed, this is emitted when the button is toggled or pressed. So we'll double-click on it, and this window will open up. Here we can select which object we want to connect to and to which method. So let's choose the button object, and we can also see if there's an existing method. So let's go for pick, and there's some method in the attached script to this button, but we don't want to use that one. Instead, we'll use onPressed, and because it doesn't exist, it will be created. So once we connect, you'll be able to see here on the right-hand side that this press signal from the button is connected to something. You can also see a symbol here next to the button node, and it's, well, a signal. Now, if you right-click on this connection, you'll be able to edit it, go to the method directly, or disconnect it. Let's go to the method. So we see that this method was created in our script, and there's a green symbol here to indicate that it exists and that it's connected through a signal in the editor. Let's add a body to it. So let's say print, I was pressed. Now, when we run the scene and we click on the button, the press signal will be emitted. This signal is connected to the onPressed method, and the method will run as seen here. So if we click it more, it happens more. Perfect. Now let's look at the second way to use signals in the editor. But first, let's disconnect this. So here, right-click, disconnect, and it will disconnect the signal. We need to switch scripts for half a second so the symbol goes away. Perfect. Now we have this unpressed method, which prints I was pressed. But we want to connect the method through code. First of all, let's create a ready method where we'll do the actual connection. And the syntax when you're connecting from the same object is as follows. First, the name of the signal. In this case, it's pressed. Then connect what we want to connect it to. And here we write a callable. So this would be our onPressed method. So we write onPressed and delete the parentheses at the end. Now this is automatically connecting to the ready method in code, and this will be called when we press the button. Let's test it out. And if I press the button, I was pressed is printed. It's that easy. Now let's connect to this signal from another object. So let's delete this here. We go to our node here, to the script, and we're going to say, well, first we need a reference to our button. There we go. And in the ready method, we're going to say the object, its signal, connect, and to what do we want to connect to? Well, we don't have a method, so let me create that. So this is how the syntax works when connecting from another object. It's the object, press, connect, and the callable, which is the method name without the parentheses. So let's test it out. We run our scene here, press, and look at that, hello is printed. Signals can also have parameters or variables bound to them. For example, here on button, we see that the toggle signal transfers the toggled on Boolean variable. Let's test it out and see what happens. So first, in order for it to work, we put toggle mode here to true in the button. Let's see what happens. So we run the scene, press the button, and we get an error here at the bottom. Why? Well, if we read the error, it says error calling from signal toggled to callable button. Do something. Method expected 0 arguments, but called with 1. So what does that mean? Well, it means that this signal toggled is trying to call this callable or this method do something with the variable and parameter toggled on, which is a Boolean, but this method accepts no parameters. So there's an error. There's two ways we can get rid of this error right now. The first way is the hacky way, where we say, okay, you know what, this method accepts a Boolean now, but we don't use it, right? So now when we run it and press this, there's no error because the method is receiving the parameter. However, this is a little bit hacky and makes things disorganized and ambiguous. There's a better way to do this. The other way to get rid of this error is with binding and unbinding parameters for the callable, which basically means adding parameters or just removing them. So in our toggle.connect here, do something, we can write .unbind and pass in the number of arguments we want to unbind. So this is just a number. We can just delete this and have our original do something method. So now if we run the scene and click pressed, I did something, and look at that, no errors. So as you might have guessed, binding is the exact opposite. You add parameters. So let's give this toggle variable back here to our do something method. And for our do something, we're gonna bind additional arguments. Now you can include as many arguments as you want here, but let's just say I want to put 1.0 and then just a string that says hello. So here we're gonna add a number float, which is the first parameter we're binding. And then we're gonna also say we're getting another parameter called hello, which is a string. And then let's print the number and the string hello. So now if we run this once again, press it, we get I did something, the float, and hello. Also important to note, when you're connecting here from the node right hand side from the editor, if you double press and then turn on the advanced options, you're able to do the same. You can add extra calls and arguments or unbind those arguments. It's up to you. I prefer using the code way. Sure, I hear you say, this is useful, but if we only have the signals from the engine, Well, actually, you can create your own signals, and the syntax is quite easy. You just write signal, and then whatever you want. To use this signal, it's quite easy as well. You simply write the name of the signal and .emit, and this will emit the signal. You can also do this with built-in signals. So for example, pressed, we can write press.emit, and this will manually emit the pressed signal. So in this example, I've created a custom signal called pressed thrice. I've also created a variable called pressed count. Now, on ready, I connect the signal from this button to the onPressed method, and this increases the press count by 1. If the press count is greater than or equal to 3, pressed thrice will emit. And on the node, I simply connected the button pressed thrice signal to our function do. So now when I run the scene, I press the button once, nothing happens. Twice, nothing. 3 times, and there we see the print statement. Pretty cool, huh? Now one more thing that's really useful to know is that these custom signals, of course, can have parameters attached to them. The way you do this is by adding a parentheses, and then as many parameters as you want, separated by a comma value. And when you call, or when you emit this signal, you want to include that parameter inside the parentheses. A minor thing to mention, but important, is naming conventions. So how you name signals is important to your project, and you can check out the Godot documentation to see how they do it. My preferred way is always a verb in the past tense with either a noun predating it or an adjective adverb. So pressed thrice, something happened, enemy died. It's very clear what these signals indicate, and the methods that will act on these signals, how I normally word them, is underscore on that actual signal. So this would be on pressed thrice. So we know that this method will be executed when the pressed thrice method is emitted. Same for on something happened and same for on enemy died. It can be when you create some of these signals that you'll get this warning in the editor saying, hey, listen, you created these signals, but you're not using them. If this is very annoying to you, you can do two things to get rid of them. The first one is going to project settings, search for warning here, and then scroll down to unused signal and simply put ignore. Now, if we reload the project, reload current project, we'll see that those warnings are now gone. But it's that easy. The other way to ignore these warnings is by putting a label on them. So we can say simply warning ignore unused signal, and this will get rid of the first warning, but not of the other two. If we want to get rid of every single one, we'll simply type warning ignore start unused signal, and then after all the signals that throw warnings, we'll add warning ignore restore unused signal. And now you'll see that all of our warnings for unused signals are gone. Something that might be useful depending on the project you work on is actually creating custom signals from code. So the way to do this, and all objects can do this, is by writing add user signal, giving a name to your signal. For example, I'm going to say whatever happened, and then providing some arguments. And here it's saying it needs to be an array, but if we look at this method and the documentation, the optional arguments for the signal can be added as an array of dictionaries, each defining a name string and a type int. And the type int you can see here in the documentation, variant type, what that would be. So each number means a type, so boolean is 1, int is 2, float is 3, etc., etc. If we want to add a parameter, we have to pass in an array, and this array has a dictionary inside of it. And this dictionary will have two entries. The first one is the name of the parameter, and we'll say this is some parameter. And the second thing will be the type. So we'll type, and then say this is type bool, for example. Well, we created it, but how do we actually check that it's working and use this user signal? So checking it is simple. We'll simply print the statement, has user signal, and we'll pass our signal here as a string name. And when we run the scene, this should print true because it has a signal. There we go. Now, in order to emit it and actually receive it, first for the emission, we can write emit signal and the string name of the actual signal. We can pass any additional arguments we want. So we'll pass false. Now, how do we connect to it from our node? Well, simply here in the ready, we'll say this object, we want to connect a signal, in this case, whatever happened, and this should connect to our do method. Before we test this out, we need to add a Boolean parameter to our do method, since the signal, whatever happened, is being called with a Boolean parameter, as we saw here, and we're also going to print that value. Now, if we run this, you'll see that we only get the true statement and not the false one, and not the hello world. So why doesn't it work? Well, that's because in Godot, children are ready before their parents. So this ready method, the button, would run first before we've connected the signal. So this emission goes into the unknown. So instead, what we're going to do, and it's a little bit hacky, but it's just for the purposes of this demonstration, is that we're going to create a new method here and call it onButtonPressed. And here we're going to call button1 and emit the signal from here. And we're going to connect our button1.pressed connect to onButtonPressed. So now when we press the button, this signal will be emitted. And we've connected that signal, the whatever happened signal, to this statement. So what we should see is that this ready gets printed first, whatever happened, which will be true, and then hello world, and then false, which is the parameter we're passing here. So if we run this, we'll see here that if we press the button, it says true, hello world, and false. Perfection. Something you can also do with signals is await them. What this basically means is that you're waiting on the signal to continue code execution of a specific method. So if in our ready function here for the method, for the button, we had, for example, print something, and before that we said await pressed, this something, even though the node is ready, would not print until it gets to pressed signal. So let's look at that in action. Nothing is being printed here, but if we press the button, something is printed. Now it won't happen again because the ready method is only run once. Most common uses of await you'll see, and this is not an await video, but we'll just go over them relating to signals, is that you'll either be awaiting a tween to be finished or an animation player animation to be finished. So you could put, for example, await, get tree, create timer, dot timeout, and this would wait for 1 second before continuing execution. Those are some of the ways you will see await getting used with signals, but there are plenty more. A specific pattern you'll often see is the SignalBus or event hub pattern. This is an autoload, which I've created here, signalbus.gd, and I've added to my project under globals, as you see here. And this specific signal hub will be able to be accessed from the entire project since it's an autoload, and signals can be emitted from here as well. I've added a new node, node2d, here as you see, and it knows nothing about my button. But I've connected that signal from the SignalBus, button was pressed, to this method, some button was pressed. Now the button, when pressed, will tell the SignalBus to emit that signal. And the SignalBus just has the signal. And if you're wondering about this warning here, this is the signal is declared but never used in the class. Now, if I were to start this project and I press this button, wow! So the signal went all the way to the autoload, and this node2d, which knows nothing about the button, was able to say, hey, I recognize the signal, I subscribe to it, and now I can print information based on that. And of course, you can also add parameters if you want, but that's the basic gist of it. And there's hundreds of variations on this specific pattern, but it's something you'll see very often, and it's very, very useful. All right, that was basically it for signals, but we'll go over a couple of small things before I close down the video. One thing to keep in mind with signals and just signal hubs, but in general just signals, is race conditions. What do I mean? So let's say we press the button and the SignalBus emits button was pressed. Our node is connected to printing yay, and this other node2d is connected to printing wow. We don't know which ones of those will execute first. And it's very important when you're creating your project or your game or whatever it is that you keep this in mind, because you can't guarantee which of these methods will fire first. So if there's a dependency, you'll oftentimes encounter errors. Another thing is that I really recommend you check out the documentation. It has a lot of useful stuff, and just for example, only looking at an object, we'll see here that it has a lot of methods relating to signals. We have get the signal list, get the signal connection list, has signal, has user signal, is connected, etc., etc. So you'll be able to find a lot of useful stuff here. Also in the signal documentation, you'll find here that the connect method, you can add flags to this, right? And these flags indicate how the connection actually works. Deferred calls the callable on idle time. A connecting one shot is only a connection that lasts for one call. So if you just want something to happen once, this is also perfect. Disconnect themselves after the emission. So please take a look at the documentation. There's much more useful stuff. Something I did not go over is disconnecting signals programmatically. This is because Godot mostly takes care of it when you queue free or kill some nodes, but there are times you will encounter errors and it's necessary to disconnect the signal. So this method is very useful, and please keep an eye out for that. Thank you everybody so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you some other time. Bye.